While I was living in the Southeast for a few weeks, I wanted to tell the history of slavery in the region, and to do this, I visited slave cemeteries and memorials and found one of the most interesting stories while I was down there, that of Omar ibn Saeed, and I became curious about Islam after learning that many Gullah-Geechee Christian practices borrow some traditions from Islam, such as facing towards the east for their services. And through research, I found that Ibn Said was buried not far away from where I was staying. And I wanted to tell a lot about the birthplace of Said, because when I grew up, the history of slavery, as I was taught it, was essentially that European powers went to a wild and untamed Africa, took people from the jungles and from the deserts, and sold them to the New World. Now, this narrative teaches that Africans were pretty much helpless and defenseless and had no real states or kingdoms or empires in the sense that Europeans had. It strips Africans of the fascinating, unique, and centuries-old cultures which they actually had at the time. Cultures which were exemplified by the state which Said was born in, that of Fudaturu. Now, to begin with Said's story, you can understand that he was a Fula Islamic scholar, a very wealthy and educated man who can be considered something akin to royalty from what is now the country Senegal. Much of these slaves were chosen out of West Africa, and a lot of them were Christians or practiced native religions, but Islam had taken a very deep root in this part of Africa, especially as you follow the river from the coast to the interior of the continent. Omar was a Fula or Fulani person, and the number of Fulani which exist today is debated because there's varying definitions of classification by country, but they stretch from the west coast of Africa and Senegal all the way through the interior, through South Sudan, and to Eritrea on the Horn of Africa. The region of Africa was chosen because there were already kingdoms, empires, and very advanced civilizations there, many of them in a state of constant war with each other. As a whole, these kingdoms and emirates practiced farming and cultivation and already possessed a great understanding of manual labor, culture, warfare, and following a hierarchy, something which European colonialists saw was easy to exploit and turn these people against each other for the benefit of the European, rather. The story of Said is a fascinating journey from the inland heart of West Africa, which began in 1807 when he was already a relatively older man. His narratives and biography tell of a man who was still deeply opposed to slavery, but smart enough to express it in subversive ways which wouldn't upset his delicate, good social standing in the Deep South. Beginning from the start, he was born to a wealthy, aristocratic family in the Fudaturu region of West Africa, as the Fulani people were just beginning to understand the benefits of uniting under one banner. The official establishment of this sovereign state was in 1776, just 6 years after his birth, and just as America was gaining independence. Omar was just a child at the time, but his family was involved with the power structure of this new state. Their history is that of an ancient state known as Takrur, which was centered along the same area of the river, founded in 800 CE. And although, as I've already mentioned, the Fulani stretch from coast to coast in Africa, they are distinguished by being descendants of Takrur by speaking a unique dialect of Fulani called Pular, and formed an emirate based on this linking feature. Speakers of this language cover the general region from Senegal down to Cameroon. At the time of Omar's birth, there was widespread political change. Until that point, a tribe of non-Muslim leaders ruled over what was called the Denanke Kingdom, which had been united from 1495 to 1776, when they were finally overthrown by Fulani aristocrats. The overthrow was a result of decades of jihads and wars. This culminated in the emergence of a reformer by the name of Nasir al-Din, who led a jihad to restore religious observance to what was at the time referred to as the Great Fula, a region of Western Africa. He was supported by a class of Islamic scholars, a sort of clan or kinship called the Torobt, but in 1677, his rebellion was defeated and they were again under the jackboot of non-Muslim rulers. The formation of the emirate was partly based on widespread discontent over the fact that non-Muslim rulers couldn't protect the majority Muslim lower classes from attacks and slavers. It's likely that it was one of these attacks that captured Omar ibn Said, and that he was targeted because he belonged to this clan, the Torobde clan. And I should explain a little bit more about this tribal class of Islamic scholars, the Torobde. As legend says, they are descended from a 7th century relative of a follower of Prophet Muhammad himself, who invaded Furaturu and stayed to begin a clan of relatives. And as such, this was one of the very first regions of Africa to accept Islamic teachings and convert from their native religions to Islam. These tribes fanned out along the Senegal River after defeating their non-Muslim rulers and formed a number of emirates via a jihad. These were known as the Fulani jihad states, and for decades the Fulani held a very noticeable grip on power, led by very aristocratic families like those of Omar ibn Saeed. Omar spent 25 years in intensive Islamic and scholarly studies. By the time he was captured, he was well versed in both theology, cosmology, astronomy, mathematics, business, and a wide range of other subjects. In 1807, however, he was captured and taken to Charleston, South Carolina. His initial master did not recognize the fact that he was a learned and elderly man and tried to use him to work on rice plantations, and this was backbreaking and spiritually demeaning work. And he wrote that he was beaten very regularly, so he escaped and he made his way towards North Carolina. In the square of Fayetteville, he was sold to James Owen, a politician and businessman. The Owen family was impressed by his education and gifted him an English Koran, as well as an Arabic Bible, which was given to him by none other than Francis Scott Key, the man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. Saeed was given multiple chances to move back to his homeland, but was uncertain whether or not his family or even his people was still intact as a group. The Owens claim that he converted to Christianity in 1820, but he wrote dedications to Muhammad in his Bible in his native tongue, as well as surahs referring to the conversion of non-Muslims to Islam, quote, in multitude, surahs which he assured his master were actually translations of the Lord's Prayer. The Owens family used these assurances to show their friend that Omar was a good converted Christian, but he continued practicing and holding his Islamic faith close to his heart. He was a genius, with decades of education, and wrote an autobiography essentially for two audiences. By recognizing Jesus as a prophet and as a Lord, he was still maintaining Islamic teachings which recognize exactly the same, although he never outright denied the fundamental teachings of Islam. Omar understood that future readers would be able to look past the constructed Christian outer layer to see that he was still an oppressed Islamic scholar, and he died an elderly man in this small county of North Carolina in 1865. It was only in the late 1990s that the Mosque of Omar ibn Saeed opened up just a few blocks away from the auction house where it's very likely that he was sold, and the local community is finally beginning to recognize the importance of Omar ibn Saeed, of this learned Fulani man.